All right, everybody, what's going on? And welcome to today's edition of SWAC Talk, the show we cover the SWAC inside and out. Of course, I'm your tour guide around the SWAC, C Wells, coming at you. And we're gonna have a football show today. Cover a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Got spring games taking place. Grambling Spring Game was yesterday. Got some spring games coming up on Saturday and Friday. And we're in the midst of spring practice. And this is kind of a special show because Friday was the 1 year 1 year of SWAC Talk being in existence on YouTube. So it's kind of a special day for me. I didn't really think when I started doing this that I would make it a year. It's kind of something that I wanted to do just to pass the time. So, I'd like to thank y'all for being here and rocking with me right now. So we're gonna keep on onward and upward. So I wanted to kind of do something a little bit different today. I went back and looked at a couple of my old videos, and my God, were they not as good. But one of the videos I did talked about SWAC rivalries, and I'm gonna link that one in the description in case you guys haven't seen it before. You can check it out. So I wanted to kind of revisit that and put a little bit more into it because it was just, I didn't really have a lot of detail to it. Just kind of was talking and going from there. So we're going to talk about rivalries today. But before we do that, you can check out the social scrolling on the screen. Check out the Facebook page, SWAC Talk, Instagram, SWAC Talk, Twitter, SWAC Talk 76, Gmail, SWAC Talk 76 at gmail.com. So you can check all of those out and go ahead and subscribe to the page, man. If you haven't done so already, man, it'd be much, much appreciated. Like the video, share them. Feel free to comment and hit that notification bell to be alerted to any time I do upload videos. Because even though I do kind of a schedule Wednesday and Saturday, Sunday, sometimes I drop videos randomly, so don't miss out on those. And as usual, run through the schedule. Wednesday, another edition of SWAC Talk coming at you. Thursday, SWAC Smoke live as usual, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. And then Sunday, another edition of SWAC Talk coming at you. And we're going to talk about all the spring games that take place this coming weekend. So we'll talk about that on Sunday. Wednesday, we'll talk some football and probably throw in a little bit of baseball and softball, whatever else comes down the pipe. So, with that being said, man, let's go ahead and jump into this. We're going to start off talking about rivalries, man. And, if you are familiar with the SWAC, then you know the SWAC is a league of rivalries. This is a league that's been close-knit. It's been, up until 1997, all the teams were pretty much the same. Alabama State was the last team to join the SWAC before UAPB joined in 97. Alabama State came in, I believe, in 82. So from 82 to like 96, you had the same 8 teams. So teams really, were able to mix it up and, develop rivalries. Rivalries were already ongoing from past years. So, everything kind of was kept together. And Bama State had a rivalry with Alabama A&M in the Magic City Classic. So when Alabama A&M came in 98, 99, that game was absorbed into the SWAC. So from then until 2020, the SWAC has been 10 teams. From 98 to 2020, the SWAC has been 10 teams. So those teams had a chance to really, flesh out rivalries, develop rivalries, grow them even bigger and better. And then adding Bethune-Cookman and FAMU this past season allowed the SWAC to absorb the Florida Classic, which is one of the top classics in all of HBCU football, and also absorb the Southern FAMU rivalry, which was one of the longest Black college football rivalries until like 2001 when the series started to be an on and off again thing. So now that's something that will be back on again. That was a long running, intense classic. Intense rivalry that took place in multiple places. They played in the MEAC SWAC Challenge one time in Birmingham. They had a few games in Atlanta. They matched up in the Heritage Bowl before. And I think they may have played in like Miami once or twice. So, this is a matchup with two programs, historical programs that have played for multiple years. That's back on the table. And you got a blooming thing between JSU and FAMU that's popping off. These teams have played a bit in the past, but they hadn't really played a lot up until now. And now that's going to be a yearly thing because they're in the same division. And if the Orange Blossom Classic of this past season is any indication, then this game is going to continue to grow. I mean, the fan base is already all at each other, man. They talk back and forth all the time, even in non-football time. They back and forth. So that's definitely the start of a rivalry. So there's a few rivalries that are booming. Some are kind of simmering. Some have not really grown that much. Teams may not be as good as they once were. So some of the luster may be off of those, but still there are some games that no matter what the teams are like, they still go hard at each other because of proximity or historical nature. They still go at each other, and so we're going to talk about all of that, and I'm just going to kind of go over these games and go through some series numbers and how I feel about these rivalries moving forward. So let's go ahead and start, man. Ain't no need for me to ramble no more. We're going to start off with the Magic City Classic, Alabama A&M, Alabama State, Birmingham, Alabama. Late October, all the time. Big time matchup. Even before Alabama A&M joined the SWAC, this was a historical matchup. And now Alabama A&M leads this series, and basically by going through a lot of the football histories of SWAC teams on their schedules and things, most of them didn't go past like 2005 or 2006. So I'm only running this back to 2005. I mean, there was a couple websites that I used that I probably could have went a lot further, but I didn't really feel like going too far. Too far back. 2005 is almost, that's what my math is hard, but what's that? 17 years or so. So yeah, that's almost 20 years ago. So that's a good place to go. So Alabama A&M leads the series since 2005 by a margin of 12-4, 12 games to 4, and they have won 6 of the last 10. So they're 6-4 in the last 10 over Alabama State, and they have a 4-game winning streak, including a spring season victory and a fall 2021 season victory. So 2 victories in 1 year over your rival. You can't beat that. This series, man, it's always typically pretty close. I mean, there's been a few blowouts, but typically, even if one team is the underdog, they still kind of find a way to win or keep it close. And these games have been crazy. They've been like crazy, multiple overtime games, games, each team over 40 points. There have been defensive battles. And now it's going to be interesting to see what Alabama A&M losing Akil Glass, who was 4-0 against this team, along with other guys. But, quarterbacks always get the hype. With him being gone, and Alabama State having an all-new team, head coach and everything, would this be the year that they turn it around? I only see this rivalry getting better and better. I mean, if each program continues to grow, then obviously the stakes get higher. Either one of these teams have been involved in the East Division race for multiple years. Alabama A&M has been involved in the East Division race since they've basically been in the SWAC. And that means that this game usually has a huge impact on the standings. Sometimes maybe not as much because, one team may not be doing so good and the other one may not be like in the mix, but it can definitely impact the division race. And I think that's going to continue. I mean, the East Division, as we know, is like crazy hard right now. So this game has a lot of implications for either team, depending on how they come into this game. And both teams come off of a bye week the week before the game historically, so they can heal up and get themselves ready. And, the tailgating here is top notch. The fans turn out in big numbers. And so it's a game that, it draws well and it is well known. A rivalry that is kind of, if you're not really involved in like social media and things like that, you don't really know that this game has grew. And it's actually it's for a long time it's been like a one-sided I don't say hate, but a one-sided intensity toward the other side. The other side is just a game. but now it's kind of growing, especially after last season. I think it's on and popping, and that's Alabama A&M and Jackson State. This has been a game that Alabama A&M has been, a lot of their people have talked about this game, even going back to a couple of times when they played JSU in Birmingham when they were when they were D2 and picked up a couple of victories. But JSU has never really looked at them that way. I really would say, there's been some really close games in the last few years, but from the spring on, ever since Coach Prime came in, I think this series has kind of taken an uptick. Him and Coach Maynard both talk. Well, Maynard talks a lot of trash. Coach Prime kind of says what he says, but all that talking back and forth between Coach Maynard and his 4 or 5-star comments, and JSU with the scooter at Alabama A&M for their homecoming. That 61-15 game. I think a lot of that amps the intensity of this series up. Right now, Alabama A&M actually leads this series since 2005 by a margin of 9-8, and they've won 6 out of the last 10 in this series. So this has been a very nip and tuck series. Like I said, there's been some games where JSU has beat Alabama A&M. I think each team has had a win streak over this period of time, and this is I think the intensity is really brewing in this, and I think as long as the principal players and those 2 coaches who both have big personalities, I think as long as they're there, this series will continue to bloom and blossom. Now, once somebody moves on or anything like that, then we'll see if it maintains that intensity. But right now, the intensity between the 2 fan bases, again, they talk maybe not as intense as like a FAMU JSU or a FAMU Southern or JSU Southern or whatever. But, there's a lot of chirping back and forth, so that always adds to it. And this is when I would put on my to-watch list when these 2 teams match up this season. Another one that's not, I wouldn't necessarily call this a rivalry, but certain incidents took place in the spring between these 2 teams kind of adds to the luster of the upcoming game. And these 2 teams, again, have a very close rivalry. They're not that far apart. It's not the biggest rivalry for either team, but it's like a secondary rivalry, and that's Alabama State and JSU. And you're going to hear JSU name pop up a lot on this list because they are a team that a lot of people feel like they're rivals against. Now, JSU may not always feel like you're their rival, but a lot of people feel like they are JSU's rival. And this goes before, the prime era. This is BP. This goes from BP to now. So it didn't just, a lot of this did not just happen because, Coach Prime came to JSU. A lot of people don't like JSU for whatever reason, and that's a rivalries occur from that. This is another tight series. Alabama State leads this one also 9-8, and they also have won 6 out of the last 4. When Coach Hill Ely was at Alabama State in the spring, he told JSU they need to send his shoe back, and they put the picture of Coach Prime on their scoreboard after they beat them. Not a lot of hype and things, really happened during the fall because Alabama State really wasn't that good. But this is homecoming at Alabama State this year. JSU's coming to town, and a lot of people are really, really looking forward to this game. So at least for the short term, this game has that intensity. It's gonna really be up to Coach Eddie Robinson and his team to kind of maintain some of that competitiveness in this series to keep it going. I mean, these 2 teams, this to me is what I would call a competitive rivalry. It's kind of like a rivalry between 2 conference opponents who have to go through each other every year to get to their goals. And you develop sometimes you develop a dislike because of that, but it's not a natural rivalry. Although in basketball back in the day, these 2 teams were travel partners before Alabama and them joined the SWAC. You had to go to Jackson and Montgomery on your basketball trip, so that they were kind of linked like that, but nothing really cemented. So this is something that at least has put some intensity on it for the time being. Moving on to Alcorn. Alcorn has a few rivalries. Of course, there's the Soul Bowl, the Capital City Classic. I think it's a SWAC Football Classic, whatever they called it last year. JSU Alcorn, it's been held in Jackson, multiple years in a row. Then it was home and home. Then it was, in Jackson for a while. Then it was back to home and home. And this is a matchup I like as a home and home because the atmospheres and the sizes of the stadiums are different. So JSU plays in a 60,000 plus seat stadium. They pack it out for this game. Alcorn plays in like a 24,000 seat stadium. So they do have, grassy hill seating, but the demand is high. You have to get on campus early. The tailgating is crazy. It's just a packed house, and it's, you either in there or you ain't. So that makes it a little bit bigger when it comes to Alcorn. But when it's at JSU, especially like it was this year, the atmosphere was bananas, and you can't really top that. Honestly, people can talk about a lot of the different FCS environments, but that environment, that last year 60,000 plus packed out, game has some implications on the West Division, especially. That you can't top that at a lot of places. That's an FBS level atmosphere right there. And so that, that really just made it even bigger. I mean, you go back to the McNair days, games were packed out. Even, there was a couple of years Alcorn won the division. JSU wasn't so good. They still beat them. Right now, Alcorn leads this JSU leads this series 9-8, but Alcorn has won JSU has won nine out of 17 games. They're 9-8, and this series right now in the last 10 is 5-5, so it's even. And when you think back about that 5-5, those were also some of those years that JSU were down, and they still were able to beat Alcorn and kind of put a damper on some of those Eastern Division championships that Alcorn won. So they had a couple really low scoring games in there where Alcorn got shut down by JSU. And that's a rivalry, when you have, throw the records out the window, like they like to say, and you just bring it and you strap up and play. So that's one that's, I think, gonna always be big. Now they're not in the same division anymore, but they are still annual opponents. So that rivalry isn't going anywhere. I don't see it, and I don't see the intensity dropping in it at all. Alcorn also has a rivalry with Grambling that's a division rivalry. I think it'll amp up some more, but you go back to the Marino Castle, Eddie Robinson days. They used to play it in New Orleans a couple of times. I think, they may have played it, they played in that New Orleans like in the early 80s. And, Steve McNair had a crazy game against Grambling, against Kendrick Norton, Grambling. McNair, bad ankle, hopping down the field, balling out. Alcorn had a season, lost to Grambling a couple years ago when they were on their way to the division championship. They were able to beat them this year. So as this series goes on, with this being a divisional matchup, the intensity it intensifies to a great level right now. Alcorn trails this series by a margin of 12-6. Grambling leads 12-6, and but Alcorn has won 7 out of the last 10 because Grambling has been up and down in this last period of time. Another rivalry that's gonna intensify, even though you really can't get much more impactful than two of the last 4 SWAC championships. Two of the last 4 SWAC championships had both of these teams in them, and that's Southern and Alcorn. Now, this to me, before these two teams were going neck and neck in the SWAC championship game, the last few years, it's been not a huge rivalry, but it was, I wouldn't call it friendly, but I would say it was like both teams were aware of who they were and you wanted to beat that team, but it didn't really have that impact because, each team had bigger rivals. Now, Alcorn has been a roadblock for Southern for a long time, and I think that made this rivalry grow because these two teams were playing twice a year for the last 2 years, and I think in 2014 they also played twice. So this has been a rivalry that's grown because it was a competitive rivalry. Two teams are like 2 hours apart. Alcorn is actually closer to Southern than Southern is to Grambling. So, there's a lot of familiar mixing, with, Alcorn being in Southwest Mississippi. There's a lot of people from Louisiana who have family from Mississippi and, vice versa. So it's a close-knit rivalry, when it's at Alcorn. Again, it's like the JSU game that you had to get on campus early. It's just one of those really, intense affairs. And now that both teams are fighting for division, that makes it bigger. Now, Alcorn has has really ruled this series for the last few years, going 13-7, and 7-3 in the last 10. So Southern now has a roadblock that they have to get through every year to win this division. Now you can't lose to Alcorn in the regular season and try to beat them in the championship. You have to go through them now to get to your division championship. So that only intensifies this, and I see it continuing to grow. A rivalry that's not really competitive, but is intense, especially when it is in Alabama, and that's Valley and Alcorn. And Valley struggles in this series. Alcorn leads at 14-2, and they've won 9 out of the last 10. But when the game is in Alabama, Valley gives it all they got, man. Valley gonna fight and they're gonna claw, but it's not, it's not a rivalry that's competitive. It's just, they share a state. They know, people know each other, and they've been playing a long time. But Alcorn, basically runs this series, but Valley definitely is a dogfight in Alabama. Moving on to Bethune-Cookman. Obviously Bethune-Cookman and FAMU, the Florida Classic. This was a series that FAMU ran for a long time, because probably up until like 98, Bethune-Cookman football was not really good. And then, Bethune-Cookman went on a run. They won 9 straight games in this series before FAMU beat them last year. So this has been, a series of streaks. And FAMU, they trail this series at least since 2005, 11-6. And like I said, Bethune-Cookman has won 9 out of the last 10. And this was a MEAC rivalry. Now it's a SWAC rivalry. So there's SWAC division implications on the line. Now, Bethune-Cookman didn't have a good season last year, and they got the jump on FAMU early, but they couldn't keep up. So, but this is an intense rivalry. I've been to this game myself a few times, and Orlando is packed. I mean, they played this game in Tampa for a little while, but Orlando is where it's at. It's packed out, and you can get a big crowd at Camping World Stadium. So I like this matchup. I'm really stoked that it's in the SWAC. That's another big attendance classic in the league, and you can't really beat that. So I really like this matchup. FAMU kind of rising back to where they were is going to definitely make this even better, because now Bethune-Cookman is going to have to, they got the rebound and try to get back on track before FAMU runs off a streak of their own, because this is a very streaky series. So all eyes are on this game. It's the last game of the season for both teams. And, there's a lot on the line, because, Florida is a big state. There's a lot of people from both sides that know each other, families and everything. So it's, it's one of those kind of matchups that, everything is involved. So I'm glad that it's in the SWAC. Another FAMU matchup, like I said before, was FAMU Southern. These two teams have played each other for a long time, up until 2001. A couple, like I said, they played in the Heritage Bowl in 95. They had a big classic matchup in Atlanta also that same year in 95. FAMU, come to Baton Rouge and drop 50 on Southern, and Southern, beat FAMU in 2001 in a last-second field goal. And then the series took a hiatus. They brought it back in 07 at the MEAC SWAC Challenge, and they played in Baton Rouge in 08. Southern won 1, FAMU won 1. Then they played in Atlanta for 2 years. Southern won, FAMU won 1, Southern won 1. And then in 2019 was the first matchup in Tallahassee in a long time. And now this is a conference matchup. And this rivalry is, it's an intense rivalry. It's now I think it's going to be bigger because it's a conference game. So, these two teams, historically, if you're like my age, you know the FAMU rivalry. People who are younger may not be, people maybe in college now may not have that same intensity. So hopefully it can build back up and get to what it was, because, FAMU was a huge game on the schedule. It was like not like JSU or Grambling, but it was a big matchup on the schedule every year, because you saw those Rattlers all the time. There's like a 6-hour drive or so from Baton Rouge. So, not that big of a difference. Both teams are similar. The fan bases are similar. And so that, that's a superiority matchup right there. FAMU leads the series 35-24, 35-24-1. There was one tie in this matchup. So this, like I said, I went back further on this matchup because, these two teams hadn't played but 6 times since 2014. So just to kind of encompass the rivalry, I kind of dove back a little bit deeper to get the historical relevance of it. Right now, FAMU is 4-2. It's 4-2 since 2014. So that's including the victory last fall. So we'll see how that goes. Right now, they're on a 2-game winning streak in this series, and we'll see how it grows. A rivalry that I think is gonna just blow up now that it's a SWAC matchup. That's JSU and FAMU. Like I said a little bit earlier, these two fan bases, they chirp at each other all the time on social media. You know, the Orange Blossom Classic was it was a classic game. I mean, it wasn't the most clean offensive game, but it was a defensive battle. And both teams talked plenty trash before the game. Both fan bases plenty trash, and from that game on, they've been talking at each other no matter who they play. FAMU, saying, "Oh, y'all got us," but we could have beat y'all. We played y'all now. JSU, it don't matter. We beat y'all. Y'all can sit down or whatever. And so this matchup, I think, is only gonna get bigger as it grows because it's a division matchup. And right now, these two are probably the top two teams in the division, which means they're gonna always have to battle each other for the division title. And it's the first game of the SWAC season for both teams. This year is FAMU's second game, it's JSU's first game. But playing early like that, I wish it was a later season game. But the series right now, FAMU leads it up until this point at 10-7-2, and they've only played actually 3 times since 2014. I said the FAMU Southern matchup went back to 2014. That was they first started playing again in 2007. So that was 4-2 since 2007. FAMU trails JSU 3-0 since 2014, and JSU has not been shy on letting them know that. So I expect this rivalry to continue to grow, and it should be a really, really intense rivalry. And no matter if it's played in Miami or home and home, maybe Atlanta, if they choose to move it somewhere else, I think it's going to always be a really good atmosphere because both of these teams are very proud and they're very good historically. They have great fan bases, and they like to talk trash both sides. So I really expect a lot from that. Moving on, the Bayou Classic, Grambling Southern, Southern Grambling, Grambling Southern, whatever you want to call it. If you're from Louisiana, you basically came up in this. If you know what's going on in the SWAC, Southern Grambling for years has been, the West Division unofficial championship game. A lot of times this game would decide the division. So that was always a thing. Even before, Southern and Grambling, you just knew you was in New Orleans on last Saturday of November, and these two teams were going to hook up. You talk trash for every day. If you win to the next game, if you lose for the next year, you saying, "Man, we're gonna get y'all next year." But this has been a very good rivalry. To some people, it's more intense. Like in my family, it's more intense because my family doesn't really like Grambling. But to some people, it's more of a family-friendly rivalry. You approach the game as a game you want to win and you want to talk your noise, but it's not like I hate Grambling or I hate Southern. But some people, the intensity is bigger. But right now, this is a huge matchup all the time, regardless of the records of the team. And Grambling leads this series since 2005 by a margin of 9-8. And Southern has won 6 of the last 10 in this matchup. So, there's been streaks. Southern had a big streak in the 90s and early 2000s. Grambling, ripped off a few, and now they've been back and forth. So, this rivalry ain't going nowhere. It's going to continue to be at the level that it's at, and I don't see that changing at all. Moving on, Grambling and JSU. That's another big matchup. There's some history there. If you know the year that Grambling, had their boycott of the football program because some insufficient facilities. That Grambling JSU game was the game that they boycotted, and they ended up playing like 3 games in a row in Jackson, which I think Grambling won those games. And so that this is a matchup. It can be intense, but it's not like do or die type of game. But right now, Grambling leads this series 13-3 since 2005, and they are 8-2 in the last 10. They didn't play last year, but they face off this season and in a non-conference game. but they faced off and they played in the spring, which JSU broke Grambling winning streak in that game when they beat them in Grambling in the spring. So I like this matchup. I think both teams are, historical, very historical, successful programs. And, in the upcoming future, Hugh Jackson, Coach Prime, that matchup speaks for itself. These two programs, they both feel like they are the top teams in the SWAC, regardless of what's going on. So that should be a big impact on this series. The State Fair Classic is a classic that a lot of people don't talk about because for years Prairie View wasn't, Prairie View wasn't good, but this matchup still drew a lot of people in Dallas at the Cotton Bowl. It's during the State Fair. You get a ticket to the game, you can go to the fair. But Prairie View's been on the uprise. They since like 2007, 2008, Prairie View program has totally turned around. And now the series has kind of turned around. So now it's a very, very, very big series. It's very important. Both teams battled out for the West Division, and Prairie View's won, a few of the games. Grambling has, won a couple here and now, but now it's a very competitive series, and it's huge for both teams. This is a game I wish was televised more than it is, but there are some things that I think going on with the promoter that they don't really want the game televised, or they asking, too much for it to be televised. But right now, Grambling leads this series since 2005, 8-7. But Prairie View has won 6 out of the last 10, and they have, they have a little streak that they have going on. And this is a game. I think this is a game, another one of those games that you can get any different type of game. You can get an offensive explosion, you can get a defensive matchup, you can get a nice back and forth affair. It's kind of low key to some people. Some people don't even really realize it's as big as it is because they think, Prairie View not good. Grambling has been good for a long time. But, that's kind of shifted, and I like it a lot. It's one that I haven't really been to yet, but I definitely want to go to. This next game, I don't necessarily consider it a rivalry. Now, if you are from one of those schools, you may. Then again, it may be a thing that one side sees as a rivalry, the other side doesn't. Neither one do. But I just felt like I wanted to put it on the list because Texas Southern doesn't really have a lot of conference rivals, and I just wanted to put it on the list because they've had some good games, and that's TSU and Grambling. They played in a couple classics in Houston over the years at the Astrodome. There's been a couple games that TSU, even though they weren't good, they gave Grambling a run for their money. But this is a series Grambling leads 11-4 and 8-2 in the last 10. So not a really super competitive rivalry. And like I said, maybe that's even stretching the definition of a rivalry. But these two teams are division opponents, and they play every year. And I just felt like it was either TSU and Southern, TSU and Grambling, and I either one of them. I don't really, as a Southern fan, I don't really consider TSU a rival. There's no disrespect. They're a team that you have to go through every year to win, but I don't really consider it a rivalry type of game. I mean, I may be the only one that feel that way. Some people might feel different, especially people that live in Houston. Maybe they feel a little bit different, but Grambling has some deep roots in Houston as far as getting players out of there, and I think that kind of maybe can impact that game a little bit. Another game that's has been an on and off type of rivalry. This game's been played in Shreveport. I think it's been played in Little Rock, home and home. It's had a couple names. I think it was the Red River Classic at one point, or the the Delta Literacy Classic or something like that. And that's UAPB and Grambling. I don't really necessarily know if this is a rivalry for Grambling. It may be for UAPB. I think some UAPB people consider this to be their only SWAC rivalry. But if it's not, then they don't necessarily have a rival. And Grambling leads the series 10-6. In the last, they won 10 out of the last 16 games, and they have won 6 out of the last 10. The Boombox Classic. What more you need to say about that? Jackson, Southern, Baton Rouge, Jackson. Big packed house in Jackson. Cramped house at Southern. Both great bands. Fan bases talk trash all the time. Just a great atmosphere. Some good games have been had. The first SWAC championship game, Southern JSU. 60,000 seat, 60,000 plus games, packed out, whatever you want to call it. It's a big game. Southern, has been good for a while. JSU up and down, but JSU ran this series from the 80s and early 90s. So that was, it's been a streaky type of series. Southern just had an 8-game streak snapped by JSU last year in a game that was very intense, came down to the very end, and it was ultimately had, a fight at the end. But this is a matchup that, regardless of the records, both teams gonna give it all they got, and both fan bases gonna go ham on each other. So right now, Southern leads the series 11-7. They won 8 out of the last 10, and the name speaks for itself. The name they call it the Boombox after the sonic boom in the South and the human jukebox. So the bands even take over this rivalry. They've named the matchup after the bands. I call it Southern JSU or JSU Southern. I don't necessarily call it Boombox. That's not my thing. Valley JSU, again, similar to Alcorn JSU. Not a competitive rivalry, but Valley definitely go ham when JSU comes to town. JSU leads this series 16-1 since 2005, and 9 out of the last 10 they won. But Valley always plays hard at home, and that kind of amps it up a little bit. Valley Pine Bluff is a matchup I think the SWAC was trying to make to be a rivalry. I don't think Pine Bluff considers it to be a rivalry, but right now Pine Bluff leads that matchup 10-6, and they've won 7 out of the last 10. The Labor Day Classic, Texas Southern Prairie View. If this is TSU's rival, this is Prairie View's big rival. Regardless of what happens, these two teams, they want to beat each other. This is a streaky type of series. Again, Prairie View was down for a long time, so TSU was winning it. TSU went down, Prairie View came up. Prairie View had been winning. And now I think it may be even. This year's Labor Day Classic, I think, is going to be a very good game. TSU has the opportunity to win. They could have won the last 2 games. This one, I think they have a great chance to win, and that only amplifies it. It's a home-and-home matchup. I think they used to play at Rice Stadium for a little while, but this is a home-and-home matchup. Both teams like 45, 50 minutes apart, so they're not far apart at all. That's familiarity. But right now, Prairie View leads the series 14-3, and they've won 8 out of the last 10. And this is a matchup I don't really consider a rivalry, but I think that there's been some intensity in this, and for the next few years, I think the intensity is going to grow because Prairie View's former coach now coaches at Southern. So, these two teams have been the last few years. The winner of this matchup has had a great chance at winning the division. Prairie View spoiled Southern's homecoming twice since 2015, and last year Prairie View has beat Southern at homecoming. Southern, beat Prairie View in their new stadium a couple of times, and the only trip that I know of to Blackshear Field to beat them at the old Raggedy Stadium. But right now, Prairie View leads the series 9-7, but Southern leads it 6-4. 2005 was actually the first year that Prairie View had beat Southern since like 1989. So that really, really made people pay attention to Prairie View. And that was just one of those things that kind of changed the luster on that series. So that's pretty much, my little spiel on rivalries. I just wanted to kind of go back in and flesh it out a little bit. I thought, that show was okay, but I could make it better. So wanted to do that. Before we get on up out of here, gonna talk about little spring football. As you know, if you don't know, Grambling had their spring game yesterday, black and gold game. Basically, I think the black won 7-6. Defensive matchup, it's spring. It's not a lot to really take from this. You don't really know. How good Grambling is gonna be. I don't think they really showed a lot on offense. The defense, by all reports, really played well. The defense got a pick six for a touchdown before the white team scored a touchdown at the very end of the game to make the score 7-6. Grambling played 4 quarterbacks in this game. None of them really stood out too much, but defensively, I heard a lot of people raving on the defense, and that Grambling's defense was not bad last year, considering how the team went. The defense was actually pretty solid. So if the defense has got better, then that's gonna only make this team tougher to beat. If the offense can improve, then Grambling's gonna be a tough out. Like spring games, you could only take so much from it. I don't really honestly take a lot from it. To me, it's just opportunity for you as a fan to go to the game and see your team play any kind of football before the fall comes around. So that's pretty much what I take it from. But again, like I said, the Black won this game 7-6. Tyron Hall had a pick six for the Black team, returning 30 yards for a touchdown. Noah Biden hit Lyndon Rash for a 53-yard touchdown to give the gold team a touchdown to make the final margin 7-6. But the story of this game to me was the atmosphere. Man, they said they had over 5,000 people at this game. That's a great turnout for a SWAC spring game. Hopefully, the upcoming games this weekend, a lot of people turn out to those. But it's not a lot to really take away from this. You really can't say, how good or bad Grambling is going to be right now. This team is, they're probably installing a new system offensively. They've been through multiple coordinators in the last year and a half or so. So this team really, you don't really know where they're at. They got a lot of transfers also. And again, I don't really think you're going to show too much in the spring game. So we'll see where Grambling stands once the season starts. They had their 15 practices now, and they'll move on and get ready for the upcoming fall camp, and then we'll see what Grambling is at when the season starts. So I don't really take a lot from it. A lot of people know that the defense is typically ahead of the offense anyway. But I think it was a good atmosphere and a good opportunity for the fans to come out and tailgate and just really enjoy the environment. So just a nice little introduction, and we'll see what happens as we move forward. Speaking of spring games, there's quite a few spring games this weekend. I'm just gonna run through them real quick. A few of these also have their junior days attached to it, so you can expect to see some recruits on campus for these games. And hopefully there's some good turnouts to all of these games, because I just I really want people to turn out and watch. Like I said, can't really take a lot from these. It's just a good opportunity to see the team and see where they're at this point. Alcorn Spring Game is Saturday. They play at 2:00. They also had a junior day going on Saturday. Valley Spring Game is Saturday at 11 a.m. Southern Spring Game is also Saturday at 3 p.m. They have their junior day as well on Saturday. FAMU Spring Game is on Saturday, also a 2:00 game. And Texas Southern Spring Game is Friday, April 8th at 6 p.m. They have their junior day that day as well. So it's packed, man. That's 5 games this weekend. So there's still, there's a lot of spring games to keep tabs on. They're all pretty much at the same time, other than, Valley playing at 11 and TSU playing at Friday. But, that's a lot. And we're going to try to cover those games on Sunday. If we get any information from them, I will be at Southern Spring Game. I think my boy DJ should be in Baton Rouge as well for that game. So, the SWAC Smoke crew will be there. And, we're going to let y'all know what we think of it, and, hopefully have a great atmosphere. So that's going to do it for today's show, man. I'd like to thank y'all for tuning in. Again, kind of 1 year celebration right here. A SWACTalk been on YouTube for a year, so that's a good thing. Hopefully we'll be back for another, and we'll catch you guys on Wednesday for another edition of SWACTalk. And then Thursday, SWAC Smoke, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. And Sunday, another edition of SWACTalk. We'll cover the spring games and anything else that takes place. Today, there is the HBCU All-Star Basketball game. I think that's 3:00, I believe, in New Orleans. So make sure you check that out. And we'll probably talk about that on Wednesday as well. So with that being said, man, I'm C. Wells. I'm signing out. Again, I'm going to link my original SWAC Rivalry video in the description, so you can check that out. And check out, see how far I've come. So with that being said, man, I'm C. Wells. I'm gonna stop this tour bus. Y'all can hop on off, and I'll catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.